Hey, welcome to AHLA's Speaking of Health Law podcast. I'm Alé Dalton, and I'm an attorney at Bradley, focusing primarily on healthcare transactions. This episode is brought to you by the Early Career Professionals Council, ECPC, which is maybe my favorite acronym in the healthcare world. Our goal for these episodes is to showcase the breadth of career paths of AHLA's members and encourage those folks who are just starting their careers in health law about all the different options and possibilities that they have in this space. And I'm particularly excited to welcome our guest today, Lee Nutini, who is senior counsel at Roe. I actually had the privilege of going to law school with Lee and his wife. And so I'm really excited to hear his story, for him to share his story with y'all. And without further ado, Lee, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. This is a great crew. Again, thrilled to be here. My name is Lee. I'm a senior counsel at Roe. Roe, just a little bit about them. It's a direct-to-patient healthcare company, telehealth company. Works in all 50 states, and I help advise them on clinical operations and healthcare regulatory work.
Very cool. I am really excited for you to share with folks how you got to your current role. This is not where you started your career, and I know folks are always eager to figure out how to get cool jobs like yours. So please tell us all the secrets.
It is a cool job. I will say that. A little plug for Roe. It's a great job. I took a lot of risks, honestly. I graduated. I think listeners, let's zoom out. Listeners are like, when does this guy graduate? Like, what?
Yes.
How do I timeline? Like, what's going on, right? So, I'm still an early career professional. Absolutely consider myself still on the learning track. I've been a lawyer since 2015, and I've gotten where I am now by taking a lot of risks. I was willing to move around and take jobs that really made me lean into different types of healthcare law. And I'll go into that in a second. But I really wanted to emphasize that it's okay to have to pick up and move. It's okay to have to sort of go and learn something different and really not change careers, but really change job functions. So when I was finishing law school, I was very fortunate to have a clerkship, but it was outside the state of Tennessee, my home state, and also the state where we went to law school. And I was willing to go do that because it was worth the risk of picking up my life and moving it somewhere else for the opportunity and for the learning opportunity, I should say. And while I was there, frankly, I said, I'm still committed to healthcare law. I didn't have a lot of that training back in law school because at that time, UT Law didn't have a lot of healthcare classes. And I'm sure you remember this, right?
Once we left, they started the program.
Yeah,
so
they're doing great now at it, but back then
awesome.
we didn't really have it. So definitely was being self-taught. So coming from that, I was thinking, how do I pivot into healthcare law? I've always been interested in it. How do I really get in that spot? And I realized I'm going to have to start cold calling some firms. Seriously. Mm-hmm. So I'm a judicial clerk. I'm up in Kentucky, actually. And I start cold contacting firms. Luckily, some people were picking up the phone at that time, was able to get some interviews, and I came in and joined a boutique healthcare litigation firm in Nashville. And so joined them after my clerkship. And I love that because it was provider focused. It was in the courtroom, deposition experience, wow. Very, very dynamic from day one. And I did a lot of medical malpractice defense. And it really taught me how to be a good writer, how to be a good speaker, and really understood provider operations. And so I was right off the bat learning like what sort of like the boots on the ground healthcare operations were and what laws affect them. From there, as I was sort of getting more in the groove of being a sort of a professional liability lawyer, I thought, there's way more out there in terms of healthcare. Healthcare law is huge. It's massive. I took another risk and decided to go to King & Spalding, and I joined their headquarters down in Atlanta to do False Claims Act litigation and managed care litigation, which was completely new to me.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to take the provider operations and sort of the provider's concerns and move that into, more complex litigation that really is not just about professional liability, but about like our whole health system and our whole provider practice. And so moved and jumped to King & Spalding and did that for a while. And then a little thing called the pandemic happened, and I realized that a lot of my provider clients were not necessarily looking towards the future. And I really wanted to really assist an innovative program going forward. And was able to get in contact with some folks at Roe, my current spot, and they needed some healthcare regulatory counsel, and I pivoted from litigation to regulatory.
Yeah.
Talk
Which is a
about more
big
depth.
shift. Yeah, there's an overlap there, but how is that? So along the way, how did you learn how to do that? Like how did you, go from med mal defense to now regulatory? And like what would you say to people who, I mean, you said you've taken risk,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of the core of your story, but like what would you say to a student who's like, I have no idea how I'm going to pivot this opportunity that I have immediately out of law school into doing something like what you're doing at Roe?
So you do need to be ready to move. If you notice, I moved from
Yes.
Kentucky, Tennessee to Kentucky, and then back to Tennessee, and then to Atlanta. Now I'm in Chicago now, by the way. And so that's part of the risk taking, is that if the piece fits for you, don't worry so much about where you are. That changes now, I guess, because you can do so much remotely. But
Right.
I think you want to find the small thread in the work that you're doing that is relatable and transferable. And this won't come as any surprise, but you want to find the things that can be important in the next role that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was provider operations were true, which whether it was professional liability issues or you're talking about like a False Claims Act case in defense of an operation there. Here's what the providers are concerned about on the ground level, and the health systems are concerned about on the ground level. And I was able to translate that and speak their language, right? And then jumping to Roe, yes, I'm a litigator and I handle disputes, but I also know a lot about how the day-to-day, 7-to-7 shifts and how the providers work together and they collaborate and all that. And that goes right into licensing, scope of practice, collaboration, supervisory rules, things like that are nuts and bolts, healthcare regulatory issues. And so, telehealth is exploding. So I was able to immediately
Right.
I had no background in that world, but diving in, being ready to learn a lot, read a lot, has helped me make the transition from pure litigator to healthcare reg.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so valuable for you to have that background and experience. I feel like it makes you an even better attorney for the role that you're in. So what does a typical day in your job look like? I feel like it can be hard to envision what people do either at firms or in-house. What does it look like when you wake up, and what do you do?
I love this question so much. It's a great question because I asked this question during probably every interview I ever
Yes,
had. And
it's such a valuable question.
no one answers it. No one actually answers it. They're
It's
like,
true.
well, maybe I call somebody, and they don't really explain,
It
right?
depends.
I am transparent.
Explain.
I will tell you what it is. Okay. So I'm at a health tech company. Ro's a direct to patient telehealth company. We are absolutely a tech company in the sense that we build our own EMR. We constantly iterate on our platform. So, but we also, of course, are doing care delivery. So I'll tell you, as a healthcare lawyer in-house, I am constantly pulled between the short-term urgencies and the long-term sort of building, right? So
Yeah.
you're hustling between that. It's not just like at a law firm when you get a project in, maybe you ask for the deadline, but all of those things are things you can tinker. Many of them are things you can tinker on for some amount of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes here, it's like, we got to know today, like right now, like this hour, what we're going to do next. And so here's what my day looks like. Starts on Slack. So we definitely communicate via Slack at Roe.
Slack, yes.
For those of you who don't know, it is like very fast-paced messaging, very informal, very good for collaboration and quick collaboration. My day definitely starts on there because what I'm doing is I'm checking and seeing, okay, who needs my attention right now? Like today, maybe an hour ago, even maybe I missed you, right? So I log in, started on Slack, handle any urgent matters that are occurring. And I'm just at that point pumping down the list of what are the important to-dos and are they getting squashed? Are they getting pushed down the list of priority based on urgencies that have come in, right? Because by the time I've slept and come back, we've had patients being treated overnight. I mean, we have patients
absolutely.
3 a.m. So I really am starting with those short-term urgencies, and then we can move to say, well, in terms of our meetings today, what can we actually tackle in our long-term priorities, or what do we need to tackle urgently? So I'm starting on Slack and then switching to email and switching to, we use Google for everything, switching to Google for my meetings. My teammates are all across the country in different time zones. But so Slack is very important, but I will say we actually have a lot of meetings. I know when I was with law firms before, I sometimes craved meetings. I thought, gosh, it would be so great to
Really?
break up my day. Now I'm in meetings from,
Like,
9
please leave me
p.m.
alone.
Yeah, it's like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., right? Like those, I'm in like
Yeah.
live, meetings, hashing things out because so
Mhm.
much advice has to be given quickly. So
Yeah.
you're really thinking on your feet and you're sort of using your judgment in the moment, rather than, taking time to write a memo. So my day does not include memo writing really. There's a lot of like live hashing out of problems,
Yeah.
handling those short-term urgencies, via Slack very furiously.
Yes. How do you feel like that's been a big shift for you going from like a litigator? Like, how have you harnessed the skills of like being a really strong writer into giving someone legal advice on Slack?
So right, the writing skills in some sense go away because you're doing it so informally. So it was a big shift going from, King and Spalding litigation to Roe regulatory work. But to me, it's all about communication. So my goal is if I'm writing something,
Mm,
I'm taking time to sort of distill it and put the right words on the page. I'm still sort of doing that in person. I'm going to say, okay, how far do I need to zoom out for this person? Or what sort of
right.
teaching do I need to do? And I think you're doing the same thing when you're
Mhm.
writing. So I think taking those communication skills and moving them into the in-person chats or moving them into informal messages, I think you can bring a level of practicality, to the communication still.
Yeah, I love that. And that's very good advice. Okay, so if you were to chat with Lee 1L year, starting off, or even pre-law school Lee, what is something you wish he had known um, before, he knew what his career would look like?
That's a really, really good question. I would probably emphasize, I wouldn't, so let's say what I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say
Okay.
more of the common things about, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't study too much because you should go network. Like that will be really important, right? Or then the people who network too much, you should have studied more.
You
Like,
should study more.
so it's neither of those things. For me, it would be a reminder. I would go back to old Lee, or I guess younger Lee, and say,
Younger Lee.
and say, you need to remember the value of time. So
Mm,
if you want to get in this niche area like healthcare law,
yeah.
you need to understand right now you have way more time than you will in the future when you're a
Mm,
professional. I mean, I think that's always true for a student.
so
You,
true.
you don't realize you have so much more time when you're a student.
Soak it up.
Write that down, students who are listening. You have way more time now. I swear to you, you have way more time now than you think you do. So I would go back honestly and do something a little bit nerdy and say, Lee, you've got several extra hours in this day.
Yeah.
Please dive into the healthcare law that you want to learn about and you care about. Please go, whether it's like checking out stuff on, Wikipedia or doing some classes on Khan Academy or whatever, like go learn more about healthcare in America. And that will help you get to where you want to go. And you have the time now to do it. So I would, again, bring that reminder and say, time is everything. You've got more of it now than you will when you're a professional.
Yeah, that's a really good one because I do feel like that's one where, especially with us who did not have a healthcare background going into healthcare, the learning curve is already so steep when you become a young lawyer. And
Yeah.
then you add on top this like highly regulated industry that has so many different rabbit holes. It can be really daunting, which I think
Mhm.
maybe might be a good way to kind of wrap up and kind of make a pitch for students and young career professionals, or early career professionals rather, to get involved in AHLA. I know that you have been a very active member, and you spoke at a conference recently. You were one of the panelists. So I would love to know how you think that folks can harness the power of AHLA into making their paths a little easier than maybe ours were learning
Yeah.
healthcare law.
Yeah, I think in terms of nuts and bolts, I think the podcasts and the webinars that are put on and the CLEs are great from AHLA, really impactful. You definitely are hearing from experts. Those are great to listen to. But in terms of getting involved, I think submitting speaking proposals and sort of getting your name out there. It takes a few times to put your name into a hat, but it gets pulled and you'll get to go in front of an audience and speak about something. And I was able to do that at the recent fundamentals conference, for example. And I think it's really great to go to those things in person and interact, because I think you will end up at a dinner table or grabbing a coffee or a drink with someone who, again, is a partner in a firm you want to go to, or is the lead regulatory lawyer at a company you're interested in. I do think, I mean, this is sort of old advice, but it is true advice, that the networking at those events is amazing. And I'll tell you, once you go from your first job to your second job, definitely continue to get together with those people at your former job, because I think it's amazing what we've been able to unlock with former colleagues in terms of, let's put together this paper to publish, or let's put together this conference proposal. And I think that it's almost easier to do it when you're out of the game with those people. It's to say, hey, listen, we've taken divergent paths, but we can both work together now and bring different perspectives to some work that we used to do. And you have that trust because you've worked together. So I think that's a way to, my initial advice to folks will be definitely dive in, always volunteer for things with the AHLA. To get involved, write for the magazine. And then beyond that, as you get a little bit more in your career, 2 or 3 years, I would say definitely look back and scoop up those former colleagues and try to present with them.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and for spending some of your valuable non-meeting time with us today.
Yeah, of course.
If folks want to follow what you're up to, is LinkedIn the best place to connect with you?
LinkedIn is perfect. It's perfect. And you can also email me at lee@row.co. I'm available all day.
Thanks for your generosity of giving that out. Well, thanks so much again, Lee. It's great to see you, and it's great to hear your story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.